Imagine you're playing a wildly complex, endlessly immersive video game.
Okay.
You log in, and like every time you crest a digital hill, you see this completely unique sunset.
Right, procedural generation.
Exactly. You encounter unpredictable events, you make choices that feel, entirely your own, and the world just bends and reacts to your decisions.
It feels organic.
It feels infinite, honestly.
Yeah.
But underneath that breathtaking sunset, beneath every single choice you make, there's a rigid, invisible architecture.
It's all just lines of code.
Yeah. Strict, uncompromising parameters dictating exactly what is possible and what is not. So what if the biology of the person listening to us right now works exactly the same way?
Wow. I mean, that is a profound shift in perspective. You're moving from this illusion of boundless, spontaneous nature to, well, the realization of an underlying executable architecture.
And that is the exact mission we have for our Duck Dive today. Usually when we start these, we are staring down the barrel of a mountain of information, right?
Oh, yeah. Dense articles, complex data sets.
Right? Hundreds of pages to synthesize for you. But today, the source material provided by a listener is astonishingly concise. We aren't standing in a sprawling library.
Not at all.
We're looking at a single, incredibly small fragment of translated text just resting on a pedestal. 3 words and an author attribution.
That's it.
The text is simply Life Program DNA by Shufeng.
It really forces a complete change in how we analyze things. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're given a massive textbook, you skim for themes.
Right.
But when you're given 3 words, you have to treat them like a philosophical koan.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of surrounding context doesn't make the text empty. It turns it into a mirror. It demands that we slow down and just examine the absolute foundational mechanics of the metaphor the author is proposing.
Let's start with the collision happening in those very first 2 words, life program.
Yeah.
Before we even touch on the biology of DNA, we are hit with this jarring juxtaposition. You have life. The concept of life is, it's wet, it's messy,
Unarticulable.
organic, deeply emotional, and it is smashed directly into program, a word entirely belonging to the synthetic realm.
Silicon mathematics.
Cold, hard logic.
The author is fundamentally challenging our default perception of existence. Like, we are conditioned by millennia of culture to romanticize biology.
Right, a seed sprouts in the soil, a child grows.
A wound miraculously heals itself. We view these things as spontaneous magic. But by imposing the word program onto these processes, that romanticism is, well, it's stripped away.
Replaced with executability.
Exactly. It suggests that underneath the messy surface of being alive, there's a strict sequence. There are autonomous functions running in the background.
Okay, I understand the mechanics of the metaphor, but my immediate instinct is to resist it.
Why is that?
To call life a program feels incredibly reductive. It feels cold. If I'm just running a life program, what happens to the human experience?
The emotion of it all.
Yeah. What happens to creating a piece of art? Or the profound grief of losing a loved one? Or that feeling of absolute awe when you look up at the stars? Are you saying those are just like pre-coded subroutines executing in my hardware?
That tension right there is exactly why this fragment is so powerful.
Yeah.
But using computational language doesn't necessarily annihilate the magic.
Yeah.
It might just relocate it.
Hmm.
Think back to that procedural video game analogy you used. The infinite variety of that game, the unpredictable interactions, the sheer beauty of it. It's all generated by a highly ordered set of underlying code.
So the parameters are fixed, but the outcomes are boundless.
Precisely. Acknowledging the code doesn't diminish the beauty of the digital sunset. It arguably makes it more miraculous,
Yeah.
that such strict logical rules can generate such infinite variety.
Sure, procedural generation makes a nice sunset, but code still implies a limit. It implies boundaries and predictability at the base level.
Mm-hmm.
If my life, my emotions, my physical reactions are ultimately bound by an algorithm, doesn't that fundamentally destroy the concept of free will?
That's the big question.
Right, because if a program typically runs from a start state to an end state with conditional logic, like if this happens, then do that, aren't we just passively writing the tracks of a script we didn't even write?
You are hitting on the central debate of biological determinism here. But let's refine the type of program we're talking about. Shufeng doesn't call it a life movie or a life script.
Right, a movie plays from beginning to end regardless of what you do.
Exactly. A program, specifically a complex operating system, requires interaction. It sits there, holding immense potential, waiting for inputs.
Waiting for the user.
Yes. Your biology provides the boundaries, the physics, the rules of your personal reality.
Mm.
But an operating system doesn't dictate what essay you type into the word processor.
It just governs how the keys respond when you press them.
You got it.
So we are navigating within the parameters of the program rather than being dragged along by it.
Precisely. When you feel an instinctual rush of fear, or, when your body perfectly orchestrates the healing of a cut over 2 weeks, you are witnessing the autonomous background processes of the life program.
Because I didn't consciously tell my platelets to clot the blood.
No, the program executed that subroutine for you. The author is asking us to view our bodies not as chaotic vessels governed by mystical natural forces, but as highly optimized, deeply sophisticated software.
Wow. Okay, so if we accept this premise of life as software, the immediate logical question becomes, where is the hard drive?
Where's the code stored?
Right, where is this foundational code actually located?
Yeah.
Which brings us to the next word in Schweffing's exact target, DNA. Life program DNA.
And this is where the metaphor drops its philosophical abstraction and anchors itself in literal physical reality. Schweffing points directly to the molecule.
This shifts things dramatically for me. Since grade school, the traditional metaphor we've all been taught is that DNA is a blueprint.
The architectural blueprint of life, yeah.
But if you really think about it, a blueprint is completely passive. It's just a piece of paper sitting on a desk.
Right.
A construction crew still has to arrive on the site, read the paper, interpret the lines, and then do the actual physical labor of building the house. The blueprint itself cannot build anything.
It merely holds information.
Right.
But a program does not just sit there.
A program executes.
A program executes.
That distinction completely rewires how we should visualize our own biology. By equating DNA with a program rather than a blueprint, Schweffing is saying the molecule is active,
Yes.
it is the literal source code, and it is actively running.
It demystifies biology by framing DNA as an instructional script that reads itself. It organizes the cellular machinery, constantly compiling and recompiling the reality of your physical body in real time.
Let's explore the causality of that, because if DNA is the active software and my physical body is the hardware, then the environment I expose myself to must be the user input. Like if I'm typing on a keyboard, the software responds to my keystrokes.
Exactly.
In the biological version, our behaviors, our environments, and our traumas are the keystrokes.
Now you're touching on the underlying mechanics of epigenetics without even needing the scientific jargon. The program, your DNA, has conditional logic built into it.
If X happens, execute Y.
Exactly. If you introduce a severe environmental stressor, say a prolonged period of intense anxiety or a radical change in diet, the program doesn't just passively absorb it.
It responds.
It flips certain genetic switches on or off. You input the chemical or emotional stimulus, and the life program DNA executes a response.
So heart rate parameters change, metabolic pathways shift.
Cortisol production increases. The code for that stress response was always there, dormant, waiting in the architecture. It just needed the specific environmental input to trigger that subroutine.
Man, if we follow this software metaphor all the way down the rabbit hole, it completely changes how we view the human life cycle. Think about disease.
Oh, absolutely.
If biology is a program, then a genetic disease isn't a curse or some random tragedy of nature. It's a syntax error in the code.
A literal glitch. Take something like cancer, right? In software terms, cancer is essentially an infinite loop.
Oh, wow.
The cell is supposed to read the code that tells it to divide, and then read the code that tells it to stop. A mutation is a corrupted line of code where the stop command is deleted.
So the program just executes divide, divide, divide endlessly.
Until it crashes the hardware.
That is a terrifying but incredibly clarifying way to understand it. What about aging then?
Aging is fascinating under this lens.
Is aging a memory leak where the program just gets slower and more corrupted over time from running too long? Or even more provocatively, is aging planned obsolescence?
I love that idea.
Like code specifically written into the life program to ensure the hardware eventually shuts down, making way for new users.
Both are really compelling ways to interpret it. Biologically, telomeres shorten as cells divide, which functions very much like a line of code counting down to 0.
Right.
And if we zoom out from the individual to the entire species, the life program metaphor maps perfectly onto evolution.
Evolution as version updates.
Exactly. Open source version control spanning millions of years. Every generation is a slight iteration of the software, deployed into the parallel testing environment of the natural world.
So if a specific genetic mutation, a tiny tweak in the code, allows an organism to survive better.
That version of the software becomes the new standard. The bugs are naturally selected out. The program is endlessly rewriting and optimizing itself for the environment.
It is staggering to try and hold the sheer scale of that processing power in your mind. I want you, the listener, to pause and visualize this for a second.
Yeah, try to picture it.
Forget the static, microscopic double helix spinning in a dark void that you saw in your high school textbooks. Visualize your DNA as lines of active, illuminated code.
Scrolling past.
Yes, it is currently executing within you right at this very second in trillions of individual cells simultaneously.
It's running the background processes, keeping your lungs expanding.
It's compiling the proteins that repair your muscle tissue.
It's quietly processing the temperature data of the room you're sitting in to regulate your sweat glands.
And it is doing all of this without requiring a single conscious thought from you. Framing it as life program DNA forces an acknowledgement of the relentless, automated genius of our own existence.
We are walking, breathing executions of the most complex software in the known universe.
Okay, so we have the code and we have the hardware, but there is an observer who pointed this all out to us. The final piece of the source material provided by our listener is the attribution.
The name of the author.
Hui Feng?
The presence of a mind behind the metaphor. This shifts our deep dive from the mechanics of the biology back to the philosophy of the source itself.
It is honestly fascinating to only have this specific fragment. We don't have a preface.
No context at all.
We don't have the chapters that came before this phrase to set it up, and we don't have the paragraphs that follow it to explain it away. We literally only have these exact words. How does knowing this is an isolated, fragmented excerpt alter what we take away from it? Like, is this the title of a biological textbook we haven't read? Is it a sprawling philosophical treatise?
Or is it purely a linguistic tool designed to provoke us?
Exactly.
The immense benefit of having such a constrained source is that it strips away the author's exposition. It leaves us alone with the core premise.
Just the raw idea.
We don't know the genre or the broader argument Shui Feng might be trying to make. But that lack of context empowers the text to function as a meditative prompt.
Like something you would be handed at a silent retreat and told to ponder for a week.
Exactly. Shui Feng acts as the human anchor for an otherwise abstract concept. Without the name, life program DNA could just be an anonymous string of technical words.
But attaching the author reminds us that a human being looked at the vast, incomprehensible machinery of human biology, synthesized it through the modern lens of computational technology, and distilled it down to this singular equation.
It is the act of labeling. By providing us with only this framed concept, the author invites the reader, or in our case, you, the listener, to fill in the blanks.
You have to do the work.
Right. The author provided the starting point, the raw architecture of the idea. But you have to construct the philosophy yourself. You have to decide what it practically means for your own life that you are running this program.
It really does alter how you move through the world once you consciously adopt this lens.
How so?
Well, if I'm walking down the street and I stub my toe, normally I'm just trapped in the subjective experience of pain. I think, ouch, I'm clumsy, and I feel frustrated.
Right, you identify with the pain.
Yeah. But through Shui Feng's lens, I have a tool for detachment. I am observing a physical impact, triggering a localized trauma response, which sends an electrical signal up the neural pathways to the brain.
Which then executes the pain protocol.
Exactly, to ensure I don't damage the hardware further.
It creates a space for observation between the stimulus and the response. You stop being entirely consumed by the emotion or the pain, and you become both the software running the routine and the user observing the screen.
I think that's why my initial resistance to the idea has completely flipped.
You're on board now.
I really am. I thought calling life a program meant I had no control, that I was just a victim of an algorithm. But actually, understanding that there is a program running might be the ultimate form of agency.
Because you can interact with it.
Yes. If you know how a piece of software responds to certain inputs, you can start being highly intentional about the inputs you provide.
That is the practical application of this philosophy.
Yeah.
If you understand the fundamental if-then statements of your own life program, like, if I consume this type of media, my biology will inevitably execute a stress response.
Or, if I maintain this physical routine, my biology will execute an optimization protocol.
Exactly. You can begin to curate your environment. You curate your diet, your habits, your social circles, not merely as an exercise in willpower, but as a deliberate matter of software optimization.
Software optimization for the human soul.
Wow, yeah.
Taking the cold logic of computational programming and using it to protect and elevate the messy emotional reality of the human experience.
It all hinges on the language we use, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The words we choose to describe our reality fundamentally govern how we interact with that reality.
Completely.
Xuefeng didn't discover DNA, and Xuefeng didn't invent the concept of life, but by putting those specific words in that exact sequence life program DNA, the author handed us a profoundly different set of tools to interpret our own existence.
Taking the time to truly unpack this listener's incredibly focused source has been such a journey today.
It really is.
We started with an empty room and a tiny fragment of text, but by treating it with the weight it deserves, we uncovered an immense philosophical architecture.
We observed how juxtaposing the organic reality of life with the rigid structure of a program forces us to reevaluate our assumptions about determinism and agency.
We saw how reframing DNA from a passive blueprint into an active, executing script changes our relationship to disease, aging, and evolution.
And we saw how the mystery of Xuefeng's isolated fragment acts as a mirror, challenging you to fill in the context with your own lived experience.
The language we use changes everything, but as we leave you today, I want to circle back to the very foundation of the metaphor we've spent this time building.
The logical endpoint of the premise.
Because if we accept Xuefeng's framework, if our DNA is indeed a life program, an executable script of unfathomable complexity running silently and brilliantly in the background of our trillions of cells.
It leaves us with one massive, inescapable question to ponder.
A blueprint requires a draftsman. A script requires a writer. Code inherently implies logic, intention, and an architect. So if there is a program running our biology, who or what is the programmer?